Abandoned in the void, the silence of deep space pressed against the hull of the Korvaxi Enlightenment, a once proud scientific vessel now reduced to a drifting husk in the outer reaches of the Cygnus arm. Captain Nevtal stood before the main viewport, his four eyes blinking in sequence as he stared out at the endless void. The ship's iridescent scales had long since dulled to a matte gray, reflecting the state of its crew, exhausted, desperate, and losing hope with each passing cycle. "Status report," Nevtal said, his voice carrying the weight of 15 failed rescue attempts. Science Officer Zex approached, her posture stooped more than usual. "Life support remains stable, but fuel reserves are at 6%. Food synthesizers will fail within 8 cycles. Communications array still damaged beyond our repair capabilities." Nevtal's gill slits fluttered in frustration. What had started as a routine exploration mission to the Mira Nebula had ended in disaster when a quantum storm shredded their propulsion system and navigation array. The Enlightenment had been adrift for 63 cycles now, carried by inertia into an unmapped sector far from standard trade routes. "And the distress beacon?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Still transmitting on all coalition frequencies," Zex replied. "But this sector, the gravitational anomalies distort subspace communications. It's unlikely anyone can hear us. The Korvaxi Coalition, once so proud of its scientific achievements and the guardians of a dozen star systems, had apparently abandoned them. The Council's promise that no vessel shall be left adrift rang hollow now." In the mess hall later that cycle, Nevtal observed his crew. Once numbering 36, they were now 29. The others had perished in the initial storm or from injuries sustained during the emergency maneuvers. Those remaining had the haunted look of beings who had accepted their fate. "We should consider hibernation protocols," suggested Chief Engineer Malk, his tentacles nervously coiling and uncoiling around his tool belt. "At reduced metabolic rates, we could extend our supplies by 4, maybe 5 times. "And then what?" asked Security Officer Vril, her dorsal spines rigid with tension. "We'd simply die in our sleep instead of awake. Is that preferable?" Nevtal had no answer. The Coalition had strict regulations against self-termination. The Korvaxi cultural belief in mindful transition demanded that one face death with full awareness. But he had begun to wonder if hibernation would at least spare his crew the psychological torment of watching death approach day by day. "Captain!" The call came over the ship's intercom. It was Ensign Trill, one of the junior science officers manning the communication station. "We're receiving something." The mess hall emptied in seconds as the crew rushed to the bridge. Nevtal found Trill frantically adjusting controls at her station. "Report," he demanded, hope burning in his chest despite his attempts to suppress it. "A signal, Captain. Not on any coalition frequency. It's strange. Unlike any communication protocol I've encountered." Trill's fins vibrated with excitement. "But it's definitely artificial and directed specifically at us." "Let me hear it," Nevtal ordered. The bridge speakers crackled to life. What emerged wasn't the standardized digital tones of coalition communications, but something almost musical, a pattern of pulses and waves that seemed to shift and adapt. "It's modulating," Zex observed, moving to Trill's station. "The pattern is changing in response to our ship's resonance frequency. It's intelligent. Can we respond?" Nevtal asked. "I'm trying, but our systems can't replicate the signal structure," Trill said. "It's too complex, too fluid." For 3 hours, the Korvaxi crew attempted to establish communication, using every protocol and frequency available to them. Nothing worked. The mysterious signal continued, sometimes fading, sometimes intensifying, but never ceasing entirely. Then, as the crew's frustration peaked, the sensors detected something else. "Captain," Zex called out, her voice tight with disbelief. "There's a ship approaching, but it's impossible." "Explain," Nevtal demanded. It appeared from nowhere. No warp signature, no subspace distortion. One moment there was nothing, the next. She gestured to the viewport where a vessel was now visible, approaching at a controlled speed. The ship was unlike anything Nevtal had ever seen. Where Korvaxi vessels were crystalline and angular, this craft was smooth and asymmetrical, with curves and protrusions that seemed to follow no logical design principle. It was relatively small, perhaps a quarter the size of the Enlightenment, and appeared to be constructed of a material that absorbed rather than reflected light, making it difficult to focus on. "Scans?" Nevtal asked. "Limited information, Captain," Trill replied. "Our sensors can't penetrate its hull. Energy readings are minimal, yet it's clearly powered and maneuvering. Origin, classification? Unknown, sir. Though..." Zex hesitated. "The configuration bears some resemblance to ancient human designs, but far more advanced than anything in our databases. Humans." The word sent a ripple of tension through the bridge. The Coalition had limited contact with humans. They were known but not understood, a species that had expanded rapidly into the galaxy for a brief period before suddenly withdrawing to their core system centuries ago. The official Coalition position classified them as unpredictable but non-hostile. "They're initiating docking procedures," Malk reported from the engineering station. "Without authorization." "Can we prevent it?" Nevtal asked. "No, sir. Our docking systems are responding automatically to their approach sequence. They know our protocols." Minutes later, the mysterious vessel had established a perfect seal with the Enlightenment's auxiliary docking port. Security Officer Vril led a team to meet whatever came through. Though their weapons, energy staffs designed primarily for scientific defense, felt woefully inadequate against the unknown. The airlock cycled open. 3 figures stepped through, and there was no question about their species. They were unmistakably human, though different from the historical images in the Korvaxi database. Taller, with leaner builds and skin that seemed to shimmer slightly under the ship's lights. They wore form-fitting garments of a material that shifted colors subtly as they moved, adapting to the environment around them. "Greetings," the central figure said, the Korvaxi language flowing perfectly from human vocal cords. "I am Captain Alara Voss of the independent vessel Pathfinder. We received your distress signal." Nevtal stepped forward, his diplomatic training taking over despite his shock. "I am Captain Nevtal of the Korvaxi Coalition vessel Enlightenment. How do you speak our language?" The human, Ilara, smiled. "We've had time to learn. More time than you might think." "Your vessel, it's human in origin?" Nevtal asked. "Yes and no," replied one of the other humans, a male with intricate patterns etched into his skin. "Human designed, but not from Earth or any colony you'd recognize." Vril moved closer, her posture defensive. "Explain how you found us when our own coalition couldn't. Explain how you appeared without detection. Explain who you really are." Captain Voss remained calm in the face of the hostile tone. "We are humans who chose a different path. Centuries ago, when Earth established its first extrasolar colonies, some of us traveled further, beyond the reach of what would become your coalition's territory. We've been watching, waiting, developing on our own terms." "Impossible," Zex interjected. "Human technology isn't capable of what we just witnessed." "Federation human technology isn't," corrected the third human, a woman whose eyes seemed to change color as she spoke. "But we aren't Federation." Nevtal felt the familiar sensation of dealing with a scientific phenomenon that challenged existing theories, a mix of fascination and unease. "Why reveal yourselves now? Why to us?" Captain Voss's expression softened. "Because you needed help. And because it's time the galaxy remembered there are humans beyond the borders they've drawn." "We can repair your ship," the male human offered. "Or if you prefer, transport your crew to the nearest coalition outpost." The offer hung in the recycled air of the corridor. Salvation from an unknown source. Help from a species that had deliberately isolated itself from galactic affairs. "What do you want in return?" Nevtal asked, caution tempering his desperate hope. "A conversation," Captain Voss replied simply. "Knowledge exchange. There's something happening in this sector of space that concerns both our peoples. Something your science mission may have accidentally discovered." Nevtal exchanged glances with his officers. The Korvaxi prided themselves on scientific discovery and knowledge exchange, but this situation went beyond standard first contact protocols. Perhaps we should continue this discussion on our bridge, Nevtal suggested. We would prefer to invite you aboard our vessel, Captain Voss countered. We have technology that can sustain your physiological needs, and we can demonstrate our repair capabilities. It was an invitation that could be either salvation or a trap, but looking at his exhausted crew and their failing ship, Nevtal knew they had run out of safer options. Very well, he said. I and a small team will accompany you. As they moved toward the human vessel, Nevtal couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter would change not just the fate of his crew, but the understanding of humanity's place in the cosmos. The humans moved with a strange grace, as if slightly disconnected from the physical world around them, and their eyes held knowledge that seemed both ancient and immediate. Standing at the threshold between the ships, Nevtal paused. How did you find us when our own people couldn't? Captain Voss turned, her expression inscrutable. Because we were already here watching. This region of space holds secrets, Captain. Secrets your council knows about but chose not to share with you before, sending your ship into danger. With that cryptic statement, she gestured them forward into the Pathfinder and into a new chapter of galactic history that none of the Korvaxi had imagined possible. The truth, whatever it was, waited on the other side. Revelations beyond the HFY. Stars. The interior of the Pathfinder defied everything Captain Nevtal thought he knew about human engineering. Where he expected cramped corridors and utilitarian design, he found instead flowing spaces that seemed to expand beyond the physical dimensions the ship should contain. The walls pulsed with a soft blue light that followed their movements, and the air carried a faint scent of ocean, impossible in the vacuum of space yet unmistakably present. Your technology, Zex whispered, her scientist's curiosity overwhelming her caution. It's not just advanced, it's different. Different paths lead to different solutions, replied the male human who had introduced himself as Navigator Kieran. We call this vessel quasi-organic. It grows and adapts. Nevtal noticed that there were no visible control panels or interfaces. The humans seemed to communicate with their ship through subtle gestures or perhaps even thought alone. They entered what appeared to be the ship's command center, though it bore little resemblance to the bridge of the Enlightenment. A sphere of swirling energy suspended in the center of the room displayed a three-dimensional map of the surrounding sector, with the two ships glowing at its heart. Your vessel suffered significant damage, Captain Voss stated, gesturing toward a detailed schematic of the Enlightenment that appeared in the sphere. Quantum storm disruption to your propulsion systems, navigation array compromised, communications severely limited. How did you obtain this level of detail about our ship? Vril demanded, her security training making her voice sharp. We scanned you before making contact, said the third human who had been introduced as Science Director Imara. Standard procedure. There's nothing standard about your procedures, Nevtal observed, or your ship, or your presence here. Captain. Voss smiled slightly. True enough. Perhaps it's time for some explanations. She made a flowing gesture with her hand, and the spherical display shifted to show an image of Earth, then a succession of early human colony worlds. 300 years ago, by your calendar, humanity began its expansion into space. The histories you know speak of rapid colonization, followed by a sudden withdrawal, a retreat back to core systems and minimal engagement with other species. The display continued to shift, showing ships departing established colonies, traveling into unmapped space. What the histories don't record is that some of us disagreed with that decision. A coalition of scientists, explorers, and visionaries took our ships and went further, beyond the reach of Earth governance. We called ourselves the Continuum. Impossible, Zex interjected. Such a splintering of your species would be recorded in historical archives. Only if those who remained wished to acknowledge our existence, Kieran said. Earth's governments found it easier to say we died in deep space, better than admitting that thousands chose to reject their authority. The display changed again, showing a distant star cluster unfamiliar to Nevtal. We established ourselves here in the Shadow Nebula, difficult to detect, rich in rare elements, and located at the convergence of several spatial phenomena that proved educationally valuable. You've been hiding all this time? Nevtal asked. Not hiding, Voss corrected. Growing, learning, becoming something different. Imara stepped forward. Human physiology is uniquely adaptable. Combined with our technological development free from Federation constraints. She held out her hand and the skin seemed to shimmer with a subtle bioluminescence. We integrated with our technology rather than keeping it external. Vril's spines flared with alarm. You're not fully biological anymore. We're exactly what we chose to become, Imara replied calmly. And what we're still becoming. Before Nevtal could process this revelation, a subtle vibration ran through the ship. Without any visible communication, all three humans turned their attention to the central display, which now showed a section of space near their position. We have unwelcome company, Voss announced. A Scaran hunter vessel approximately 18 minutes from intercept range. The word sent a chill through Nevtal's body. The Scaran were nomadic predators, scavengers who preyed on damaged ships and isolated outposts. The Coalition had been fighting them for decades with limited success. They must have detected your distress signal, Kieran suggested. Been tracking you for some time. If they find us here, Nevtal began. They won't, Voss stated with calm certainty. Navigator, initiate shadow protocols. Science Director, prepare the medical bay for our guests. Turning to the Korvaxi, she continued, Captain Nevtal, we need to move quickly now. Your ship cannot be repaired in time, and we cannot tow it without revealing our presence. We need to evacuate your crew to the Pathfinder. And abandon our vessel? Nevtal's gill slits fluttered in distress at the thought. Temporarily, Voss assured him. We can return for it after dealing with the Scaran threat. Nevtal hesitated. The Enlightenment contained years of scientific research, cultural artifacts, and the personal belongings of his crew. Yet the Scaran would show no mercy if they found a disabled ship with a vulnerable crew. Very well, he conceded. But I need assurances for my people's safety. You have them, Voss said simply. Kieran will show you to our communication array, so you can instruct your crew. We have approximately 15 minutes. The evacuation proceeded with startling efficiency. The humans provided transport pods that moved through space between the vessels without apparent propulsion, carrying Korvaxi. Crew members 4 at a time. Essential data cores and research materials were salvaged. Within the narrow window before the Scaran arrived, all 29 surviving crew members and critical supplies had been transferred to the Pathfinder. Through a viewing port, Nevtal watched as his ship, his home for the past 7 years, grew, distant then seemed to blur and fade from view. What happened to our ship? He demanded. We've cloaked it, Imara explained. A projection field that bends light and other electromagnetic radiation around it. To sensors, it simply isn't there. And us? Vril asked. The same principle, but more complex since we're in motion. In the command sphere, the display tracked the approaching Scaran vessel, a jagged, asymmetrical craft bristling with weapon systems. It slowed as it reached the coordinates where the Enlightenment had been, sensors sweeping the area in confusion. They're hunting, Kieran observed, but they won't find anything. The tension among the Korvaxi crew was palpable as they watched the Predator searching for them. The Scaran were known for their persistence and their cruelty. Being this close to them, even while hidden, triggered deep instinctual fear. They're leaving, Voss announced after 30 tense minutes. Returning to their previous course. The collective relief was short-lived, interrupted by a simple question from Zex. Why were you here when we needed help? What interest does your continuum have in this isolated sector? Captain Voss exchanged glances with her crew before nodding. The same reason your council sent a science vessel here without adequate warning or protection. This region contains temporal anomalies, ripples in space-time that allow glimpses of possible futures. That's theoretical science, Zex protested. No practical applications have been developed. By the Coalition, Imara corrected, we've been studying these phenomena for generations. They're growing stronger, more frequent. Something is disturbing the fabric of reality. A new image appeared in the display sphere, a swirling distortion that pulsed with energy unlike anything Nevtal had seen documented. This is a temporal nexus point, one of 7 we've identified in this sector. Your ship's course would have taken you directly through it. Are you suggesting our mission was deliberately planned to investigate these phenomena? Nevtal asked, unsettled by the implication. We believe certain elements within your coalition are aware of these anomalies and their potential, Voss replied, carefully. But rather than risking their military vessels, they send scientific expeditions, deniable expendable probes. The accusation hung heavy in the air. Nevtal wanted to reject it outright, but fragments of memory surfaced. The unusual secrecy surrounding their mission parameters, the Council's insistence on radio silence except for emergencies, the oddly specific course corrections they were ordered to follow. If what you're saying is true, he said slowly, then our own government sent us into danger without warning. Politics are the same throughout the galaxy, Captain, Kieran said with a hint of bitterness. Those with power use those without as instruments. In the following hours, as the Pathfinder moved deeper into uncharted space, the human crew shared more of their history and knowledge with the Korvaxi. They explained how the Continuum had developed technologies focused on adaptation rather than dominance, integration rather than exploitation. Their ships were semi-sentient, their bodies enhanced but still fundamentally human, their society built around principles of collective growth and exploration. In the medical bay, Korvaxi crew members received treatments for long-term radiation, exposure and nutritional deficiencies they hadn't even realized they were suffering from. Imara demonstrated medical technology that operated at the cellular level, accelerating healing and optimizing biological functions. Why share all this with us? Nevtal asked Captain Voss as they stood in an observation dome, watching stars streak by at speeds his scientific training told him were impossible without massive energy expenditure. After centuries of isolation, why reveal yourselves now? Voss's expression grew solemn. Because what's happening in this sector affects all sentient life in the galaxy. The temporal anomalies are symptoms of something larger, a coming convergence, that will force change upon all our civilizations. We've seen glimpses of possible futures, Captain. In too many of them, life as we know it ends. And in the others? In the others, species that have been separated by politics, history, and fear learn to work together. She turned to face him directly. The Coalition needs to know what their council is hiding. Earth needs to remember there are humans beyond their borders, and all of us need to prepare for what's coming. So we're not just survivors to you, Nevtal realized. We're messengers. You're both, Voss said. Your crew deserved rescue regardless. But yes, when you return to Coalition space with evidence of what you've discovered here, and with proof of our existence, it will create ripples, necessary ones. 2 days later, the Pathfinder approached a hidden Continuum outpost, nestled within an asteroid field. The base was extensive yet nearly invisible to conventional sensors, with structures that seemed to grow organically from the asteroids themselves. As they prepared for docking, Nevtal gathered his senior officers. We need to make a decision. These humans offer to repair our ship and provide us escort to the nearest Coalition outpost, but they ask that we share what we've learned about the temporal anomalies and about their existence. It would violate Coalition security protocols, Frill pointed out. The same protocols that sent us into danger without warning? Malk countered. The Council doesn't deserve our loyalty if they used us as expendable probes. Zex, always the voice of scientific reason, spoke carefully. If these temporal anomalies are as significant as the humans claim, withholding the information could endanger countless lives. Our duty to knowledge transcends our duty to political structures. In the end, the decision wasn't difficult. The Korvaxi crew had been abandoned by their own government and saved by those they had been taught to consider mysterious outsiders. The truth mattered more than outdated loyalties. As they docked with the Continuum base, Captain Nevtal joined Captain Voss at the airlock. "Your people don't seem alarmed by our arrival," he observed, noting the calm activity visible through viewports. "We've maintained contact with several species over the centuries," Voss explained. "Discreetly. You're not the first to discover we exist, just the most recent." "And what happens next?" "We repair your ship better than new. We share data about the temporal anomalies. When you're ready, you return to Coalition space with a decision to make. Speak the truth or maintain the convenient fiction that humanity is exactly what your histories claim it to be." Nevtal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of determination in Korvaxi culture. "I've always been a scientist first, Captain. The truth is my currency, however inconvenient it may be." As the airlock opened onto the Continuum base, revealing a spacious docking bay where humans worked alongside several other species Nevtal recognized, and some he didn't, he felt a profound sense that he stood at a turning point, not just for his crew but for galactic history. The abandoned had found not just rescue but purpose. The forgotten had discovered they were part of something larger. And humanity, or at least this branch of it, had decided it was time to step back into the light, not as conquerors, but as guardians against a threat only they had foreseen. The story of the Enlightenment and its crew wouldn't end with a lonely death in the void after all. Instead, it would become the opening chapter of a new alliance, one that transcended old boundaries and faced the future with open eyes. As he stepped onto the station, Nevtal knew with certainty the galaxy would never be the same again, and perhaps that was exactly what it needed.